no end to war. Even when the war to end all wars, that great tragic European conflict that killed more than 116,000 Americans and brought Western civilization to the brink of destruction, it was only the first of 2 world wars. Because 30 years later, another horrible war laid waste vast areas of the same territory, from London, England, to Moscow, and all parts in between, all across North Africa, and it involved even the most developed nations and remotest islands in the Pacific. More than 405,000 Americans died in World War II. And here we are now 73 years later, and we're still counting new wars. 58,000 Americans were killed in the Vietnam War, 54,246 in the Korean conflict, 4,497 American soldiers, sailors, and Marines died in Iraq between 2003 and 2011. And thus far, the ongoing war in Afghanistan has killed 2,216 Americans, and 20,000 have come home wounded. Chris Hedges writes, "The image of war handed to us even when they're graphic, such as the opening 20 minutes of Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan, leave out one essential element of war: fear. There is, until the actual moment of confrontation, no cost to imagining glory. The visual and audio effects of films, the battlefield descriptions in the books, makes the experience appear real. But in fact, the experience for us is sterile. We are safe. We do not smell the rotting flesh or hear the cries of agony or see before us the blood and entrails that are seeping out of bodies. We view from a distance the rush and the excitement, but we feel none of the gut-wrenching anxiety and the humiliation that comes with true mortal danger. It takes the experience of fear and the chaos of battle to wake us up and make us realize we are not who we imagined ourselves to be. The prospect of war is exciting. Many young men schooled in the notion that war is the ultimate definition of manhood, that only in war will they be tested and proven, that they can discover their worth as human beings in battle. They willingly join the great enterprise. The admiration of the crowds, the high-blown rhetoric, the chance to achieve the glory of the previous generation, the ideal of nobility beckons us forward. And people ironically enjoy the righteous indignation and to have an object upon which to unleash their anger. Unquote. See, that's what I call the romance of war. It was the hope of the League of Nations after the First World War, and then again in establishing the United Nations after the Second World War, that diplomacy would win out over war as a means of doing foreign policy. Even as America was ramping up to launch the attack on Iraq in 2003, hundreds of thousands of people were in the streets every weekend. If you remember the news, remember the newspaper articles, and they were saying, "No more war, not in my name, give peace a chance." But it seemed nobody in authority was listening. They'd already been bit by the bug of being warriors. Christians across the world and across recent centuries have condemned the senseless slaughter of innocents that every war includes. The Christian population as a whole has lifted holy hands to heaven in passionate prayer for peace, but it seems we have done precious little to actually achieve it. Oh, sure, we're convinced that war is hell, and we want no part of it. We've long felt that there's something wrong. It's economically suicidal when governments all around the world spend hundreds of billions of dollars every year to threaten to kill the life given to this planet by our Creator God, and to do so as a deterrent. In other words, we're going to forcibly keep peace. When we consider that 1 out of every 5 American children goes to bed hungry, there's something horribly wrong. Our economic and cultural priorities are askew in the inflated military spending on industrial armaments. America is the world's producer and highest war-making profiteering, and we know it. Nevertheless, when it's times of peace and we feel calm, there is security. Our politicians insist that that's when we should be building up our strength for the next inevitable attack. I mean, semper fidelis, ever vigilant. Compassion, that's like a luxury. You offer it to your friends if we think they deserve it. We listen to a text like the second one, the one from Micah that Tom Grobaugh read for us. We listen to a text like Micah when we're in church, but back out there in the real world, we think that tenderness is weakness. It's inappropriate. It's irrelevant to when the enemy is at the gate. When the war drums rattle, we give up our childish notions that we can depend upon a divine providence. And we decide instead that we're going to have to take control. We're going to have to make some things happen. And so we go on our crusades against evil. I'm riding off to war where the mighty cannons roar. Yeah. I think we need to take seriously the moral dimension in every action that we take. The moral dimension is very simply where what you're going to do will have an effect on someone else. And we need to take that moral dimension especially into thought when our action is going to involve significant violence. The theories of a just war cannot be dispensed with every time just because it's our war. The only antidote to ward off the heady rush of what war promises to give us, that sprightly, waking, audible, full of vent, as Shakespeare put it, our only antidote to the indiscriminate use of force, according to Chris Hedges, is humility and compassion. Reinhold Niebuhr aptly reminded us we must all act and then ask for forgiveness when we realize our actions were hurtful. His book is not a call for pacifist inaction, but it is a call for national repentance. The failure of our efforts in Vietnam humbled America for a generation, and it is just as I was coming of age here in Alpena. We were purged as a nation of a dangerous hubris, the belief that our firepower, our manpower, our latest form of military technology would be able to silence every enemy. And that failure in Vietnam forced America to introspection, to reflect upon the limits of making war as a means of diplomacy, and to reconsider using violence as a form of communication. Coming to grips with that war through the years of Presidents Jerry Ford and Jimmy Carter, who were the two commanders-in-chief that I served under in my 4 years in the U.S. Army. Coming to grips with that under those two presidents offered us a chance to gain new understanding about our role in the world. And I think America was becoming a better country because of our humility and our self-examination. In this week's Christian Century, former President Jimmy Carter writes, and I'll quote him, "One of the things that America would like to be is a superpower. But there are more elements in being a superpower than just military strength. The United States of America ought to be seen by the rest of the world as a champion of peace, not war, a champion of human rights, a champion of equality, and a champion of generosity to help people in need. Those are the kinds of values that need to be emphasized in the future of America. And I hope and pray this will be the case." Jimmy Carter is now 93 years old. And somehow I think that message is slipping away from us. using talk of war as a negotiating ploy, as just one of the deals that's out there on the table, and increasing the Pentagon's budget higher than the generals even asked for, indicates that the romance of being seen as a world-class warrior is ascendant, while the destructive reality of war is downplayed. The prophet Joel's sentiment, "Prepare war, stir up the mighty men," seems to be gaining support and voice in America, while the prophet Micah's call to beat your swords back into plowshares and your spears into pruning hooks seems soft, utopian, unrealistic. So frankly, I'm on Micah's side, not Joel's. But you'll have to choose for yourself between the romance and the reality of war. May your Memorial Day be peaceful and meaningful. Amen.